Good morning, everyone. Pastor Howie here with some Celtic Advent thoughts for the day from the Celtic Daily Prayer book published by the Northumbria Community, which you can access at northumbriacommunity.org. Anyway, today's scripture reading comes from Psalm 27, verses 7 through 9, Genesis 32, verses 27 through 30, and Luke 5, verses 8 through 11. And they're all connected together, and they're all worthy things to think about during this time of year, as I've decided this year to kind of follow Celtic Advent beginning Monday, this past Monday. And if you're wondering what that bright spot is over my shoulder this way, it's the sun actually shining through my office window for a change, and it's a very welcome thing to me. Anyway, let's look at these scriptures. Psalm 27, verses 7 through 9. We have a prayer, and the prayer is, "Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come," my heart says, "seek his face. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You who have been my help, do not cast me off. Do not forsake me, O God of my salvation." And so we have here the cry of someone who has known times when prayer was necessary, has known times when circumstances were difficult, but has known his heart's cry to God, to seek God's face. And in reality, that is what our hearts should always cry. We should cry out from the depths of our hearts all the time, in good times as well as in pandemic times and the winter times when the weather turns cold and the shadows are long and the days are short, because so many people have difficulty emotionally during this time. And when we think about divisive times like the politically divisive climate in which we live here in the United States today, and we think about the worries that we have and the disappointments we face when we cannot and should not, I mean, it's not illegal, but it's been highly recommended that we limit our social contact during the holidays, which is abnormal for us. These things are all trying to us, they're all hard for us. So we cry with the psalmist, "Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come," my heart says, "seek his face. Your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me." And you know, that's not the cry of someone who's experienced God hiding his face necessarily. It's just the idea that perhaps his friends have hidden their faces from him. Like Job's friends were not very comforting to him. "Do not turn your servant away in anger, you who have been my help." His confidence is in the Lord, even if he has no confidence in anything else going around him. Is that our heart's cry? If it's not, or if we're experiencing a sense of desolation and that God has turned away from us, then turn to him. Cry out to him. Plead with him. Wrestle with him. And that brings us to Genesis 32, verses 27 through 30. And this is part of the account of Jacob coming back to leaving the land of his wife's home. And after serving for 21 years for his 2 wives and then his cattle, he now leaves Laban, his uncle, to come back to his homeland from whence he left after he had deceived Esau, and Esau had become so angry that he desired to kill his brother. So Jacob fled, went back to the household of his mother and his mother's brother Laban, and had been gone for 21 years. Now he's returning, and he's a bit fearful. He doesn't know what the reaction of his brother Esau is going to be, whether it's going to be a welcoming or whether it's more likely going to be very challenging, if not an emotional conflict, but perhaps even a physical conflict, perhaps even bloodshed. He doesn't know. The last he knew, his brother Esau hated him and wanted him dead. So the night before he meets his brother Esau, he prays. He wrestles with God. And these are the verses that describe that. Genesis 32, 27 through 30. So he said to him, and this is, we're breaking right into the conversation. So the person who's speaking here at the beginning of verse 30 is the angel of the Lord. So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Other translations of this say, "You have wrestled with God." You have wrestled with God and with humans and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." So Jacob, now known as Israel, was wrestling with God. It's clear that that was Jacob's idea in his head. And when he asked for his name, I don't think he really expected for God to tell him his name. It's interesting, later on, 400 and some years later on, when Moses was also living in the wilderness in the land of his father-in-law, because he had fled Egypt because he had a sense of the injustice being done to his brothers and sisters of Israel by the Egyptians. And he rose up in anger with this kind of overzealous sense of justice, and he killed an Egyptian, and it was found out, and so he fled because he was afraid for his life. And he spent time in the wilderness, and while he was tending sheep, he came across a burning bush where he had an encounter with the fire of God, which is an all-consuming fire, but it wasn't consuming that bush. It was a miraculous revelation, a miraculous revelation, an apocalyptic event, if you will, in Moses' life. And God calls Moses and tells him, "I'm sending you back to Egypt. You're going to lead the people of Israel, my people, out of bondage in Egypt." And of course, Moses says, "I'm not qualified, I don't speak well." He's got all kinds of excuses, and finally it comes down to God saying, "Well, you're going. I'll call upon your brother Aaron to help interpret you to the Egyptians, but you're going." And so then Moses says, "Well, what is your name, that I may tell Pharaoh that you have called us to leave Egypt?" And God, at that time, tells Moses his name. "I am that I am." Well, the "I am that I am" is also the person that met Jacob in this night of prayer, this night of wrestling. And the name that Jacob ultimately put on this place, Peniel, means I have seen God face to face. And yet my life is preserved. And we have met God face to face in the face of Jesus Christ. And perhaps we've not seen him. I know we've seen lots of representations of him on the walls of our churches, perhaps even in our homes, but they are artists' conceptions of Jesus. And it's interesting that the artists who give us pictures of Jesus from the context of their particular culture. So most of the pictures we have of Jesus come from the European Renaissance times, and they come from a culture that is basically Caucasian, perhaps Latin-based Caucasians, and sometimes it takes us a moment to realize that if we see pictures of Jesus written by Ethiopian Coptic Christian artists, he's black. So we have this way of conceiving of Christ in our own context. But the fact of the matter is, we've met God face to face in the gospel of Jesus Christ, not by the sight of our eyes, but by the sight of our hearts in faith. For by grace we are saved through faith, and that not of ourselves, it's the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. But we have seen God face to face. And we have seen him interacting with human beings just like you and I in the Gospels, which brings us to Luke. And in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, verses 8 through 11, this is breaking into the account of Jesus meeting Peter and James and John, who had been fishing all night long, and it's early in their relationship, and they really hadn't come to any clue as to who this person was that was interacting with them. But he meets them, and he asks them about their fishing experience. They didn't have any luck, so he sends them back out. Cast your nets on this side of the ship. And their net was filled, and they were amazed. And so verse 8 begins with, but when Simon Peter saw it, that is, this large catch of fish, clearly miraculous in his mind, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. So Jacob left Peniel with confidence, met his brother, found reconciliation, and grew into a nation, or grew into a large family at least, a family of Israel that ultimately went to Egypt and became a great nation, and ultimately was delivered from bondage in Egypt, and ultimately brought to us this Jesus of Nazareth, this Jesus who is the Christ, this Jesus who is in human form, a human being, the divine God in human form, incarnated for us to see, at least by faith, face to face. And we sometimes, I think, wonder at the experience that Simon Peter and James and John and the other disciples had, literally face to face. Someday we will see Jesus face to face. And what Jesus says here seems contrary to the heart cry of the psalmist. For the psalmist is asking God, "Lord, your face, Lord, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me." Simon Peter, knowing that he is in the presence of miraculous power, perhaps not really knowing who Jesus is yet, but seeing this miraculous power of this person standing in front of him, says, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." When we have a conviction of sin in our hearts, we I think, naturally recoil from the idea of meeting God face to face. Perhaps that's what the psalmist was thinking. Perhaps that was what Jacob was wrestling with. Certainly that's what Simon Peter felt. And yet we have in the gospel, in the face of Jesus, these same words. And they apply to us no matter what's happening in our lives, good or bad, but especially they apply to us during the bad times. Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people. So God is now using us who have decided to follow Jesus to catch people. And God has left us in a world that is very challenging to us. But Christ's words to Peter are our words, or are Christ's words to us. Do not be afraid. And so, may we leave everything that causes us fear. May we leave everything that distracts us from focusing upon what Christ has called us to do, to follow him. May we leave all of that behind and follow him who tells us, do not be afraid. So may you be blessed today, and may you draw closer to Christ today than you were yesterday. And may we look forward to that time when we will see Jesus Christ face to face. God bless you. See you tomorrow.